Welcome to Landlords TV, brought to you by Landlords New York. This is L&T Time with Michelle, the show where you get to have a cup of tea with me, Michelle Morato-Itkowitz, and we discuss an area of law that I have been practicing in New York City for over 20 years, and that is landlord and tenant litigation. And we also have as guests some of the top real estate professionals in New York City, and today I am truly honored to have Michael Vinokur with us. And Michael has been in the real estate industry for over 10 years?
2000 we started.
2000, okay. So Michael has an MBA from Yale. I just wanted to put that in because I think that's very impressive. His company is Building Equity Management, and your portfolio is mostly residential, mostly stabilized, mostly Manhattan. Some you own, some you're third-party management, and you go down as low as Little Italy and you go up to Washington Heights. Do I have that right?
That's correct, yes.
And you're very busy.
Yes. And I have other businesses as well, so yes, I'm very busy. But management is a 24/7 business. Luckily, we've stayed geographically constrained to Manhattan.
Did you do that on purpose?
Yes, because they have to be on trains for 2 hours back and forth to Brooklyn.
And you're very hands-on. You're very high-tech, which frees you up to be very hands-on, walk your buildings, know your tenants.
Yes. We leverage our time and try to be efficient. We use technology where we can, but it still comes down to the physical building and to the administrative side of the business, and those are the two core components.
So let me ask you this, because this is what I think a lot of our membership really wants to know. You're going in to manage a lot of buildings that really nobody's had their hands on in a while. So where do you start when you're really approaching a building and trying to add value?
Well, there's a handful of obvious things to look at. Generally, we're talking in those buildings that have some pretty high rent-regulated components still. So there's upside, and that's generally why we'll have bought the building or why the person we're managing for will have bought the building.
So you do a lot of due diligence ahead of time on those?
Well, you assume the worst. There's not that much. The only real due diligence that I look at whether there's ever been previous MCIs, because part of our strategy, an MCI is a major capital improvement that allows the landlord, if it's qualifying according to the rules of DHCR, to basically raise the rents by 1/84th of the improvement, which is in essence a 7-year amortization of your expense. So if you have a building that's entirely rent regulated and below market, if you do the math, that comes out to a 14% return on your money. If you're borrowing from the bank at 3.5%, you would do that all day long. So that's a key part of our strategy, is always as many major capital improvements that fit within this law that haven't been done before. So the reason you need to bring that in as your due diligence is DHCR has useful life tables on various components of your building: the roof, the windows, the doors, the boiler, the electrical, the plumbing. And if an MCI has been filed within that useful life, they're not going to let you file another one now, because there would be an incentive for landlords with deep pockets just to do these over and over again and snowball the rents up. So DHCR is on to that. So if you're going this route and you're not familiar with MCIs, I would recommend going to the DHCR website. There's bulletins.
It's very informative, but you said to me off camera, if you're going to read the DHCR website, you need to get a bottle of wine. It needs to be at night.
Yeah, but
you need to sit and read. There's a tremendous amount of information.
It requires some discipline. But if you want to look at MCIs, which we've just discussed, if you've got rent-controlled tenants, you're insane not to file for what's called an MBR. It stands for maximum base rent. It's done in a 2-year cycle, the filing, but once approved and once you get the hang of it, you get 7.5% increases every year, which beats what you're getting on your stabilized apartments, and it's generally more than you're getting on your market rate apartments. The only caveat is that you have to remove 80% of the prior year HPD violations, and I think all of the C violations, which the first time is a little bit of work, but if you want to have a nice clean building, you want to get rid of those things anyway. And the financial cost of doing so is rewarded because you're getting a 7.5% increase. On MCIs, also with rent-controlled apartments, if you do enough of them, you can get 15% a year. So all of a sudden, you're in a situation with a rent-controlled unit in a building where you're reinvesting. you can get 22% a year annual increases in rent, and it doesn't take that long from a $250 rent to then grow to a $750 rent.
It's funny how you said when we were off camera, when I first asked you the question, how are you adding value? And you said, oh, well, it's not rocket science, but
it's not. You need to know. You need to know how to take advantage of the few bones they throw you within the rent regulation.
Like you're maximizing every opportunity.
And I'm not alone. Plenty of people have figured this out, but you have to dig. It doesn't just come to you, or you hire a consultant. So there's things like that. You can do an MCI for either a new boiler or to convert from oil to gas. That's the biggest no-brainer in the business. If anybody has a building that's still running on oil, then either their heads in the sand or they just don't have the financial resources to do the improvement, because you can increase the rents for the cost of the improvement, plus you're reducing your fuel costs probably 40%. So every one of our buildings we've converted.
It's excellent stuff, and really it's really just the tip of the iceberg. We can talk about this all day, but could you just hang out for a moment, and we're going to move into the landlord and tenant teaching portion of our program,
Sure.
where today we're going to be talking about things very similar to this in the sense of keeping your paperwork in good order and having all your ducks in a row so you can be well set up for your landlord and tenant case. So I'll catch you after. Okay, so what we're talking about today are things that a landlord can do prior to bringing a landlord and tenant case. Things they can think about to make sure that their building and their tenancies are in good shape so that when you go to do your L&T case, it will be a good, sound case. I often like to say that landlord and tenant cases are won or lost before they're even filed, and that's because of details like we're about to talk about now. So for instance, the deed. I like to see a case where the name of the owner on the deed is the same as the name of the landlord on the lease. So if Joe is on the deed, Joe is the landlord on the lease. But a lot of times you don't have that. A lot of times the reason you don't have that, let's say you have Joe on the deed and Mary's on the lease. Well, that might be because Mary used to own the building and made a lease with the tenant, and then she sold the building to Joe. So that's why now you have a deed with Joe and you have a lease with Mary. That's okay, because what I'm going to ask you for as your landlord and tenant lawyer is the assignment of rents and leases that happened at the closing. I'm sure your transactional attorney did an assignment of rents and leases, giving all those leases from Mary to Joe. But let's say you can't put your hands on that. Let's say you can't find it. Let's say maybe it just didn't get done. We're still okay, because Real Property Law 232 says that all of the leases are deemed assigned by virtue of the transfer, so we're probably still okay. Where we run into a problem is if Joe comes into my office and Joe says, oh, I own this building, do a rent demand for me. Okay, fine. And let's say I'm not thorough and I don't check the deed online on Acris. I don't check it. I just bring the rent demand in the name of Joe, and then I bring the petition in the name of Joe, and then we go into court and we can't settle it. We're going to do a trial. I'm getting my certified copy of the deed, and I look and the name is Mary. And I say, wait a minute, Joe, I thought you owned this. Who's Mary? And Joe says, oh, Mary's my mother. The building's in my mother's name. I don't even know what that means. I don't know why you did it. But the point is there's a disconnect that I now have to figure out how to deal with. Thankfully, there is appellate case law that says that the name of the landlord on the lease can be the instrument pursuant to which I say the landlord has standing to bring that case. I don't love using it though, because not all the judges are so familiar with it. There's 1,052 new landlord and tenant cases filed in New York City every day that the court is open on average. The judges are busy, and I don't want to bother them with like my first department case and my explanation that's a long story about Joe and Mary. I'd rather just have this tight. So these are the kind of things you can be thinking about ahead of time as a landlord, making sure that when you lease up a building, you're leasing it in the name of the entity that currently owns the building. So maybe you just changed from a partnership to an LLC in the course of a refinance. When you do new leases, don't keep doing the name of the partnership, put down the LLC. It just makes life a lot easier. Michael, thank you for sticking around.
Thank you for having me. That was very instructive.
I hope you join us again in the future.
It'd be my pleasure.
Thank you for watching L&T Time with Michelle on Landlord TV.